This is Small Business Conversations with Akona Machoba, unlocking essential advice, opinions, and key issues that affect South Africa's small business community.
Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the Small Business Conversations podcast, Moneyweb's weekly SME show highlighting critical issues affecting South Africa's small business environment. Now, this week on the podcast, I am joined by the CEO of the People's Fund, Luyanda Javda, to talk about the work the fund is doing to assist entrepreneurs servicing government and corporations to manage their cash flows through crowdfunding. As a purchase order crowdfunding platform, the People's Fund helps SMEs by providing them the capital boost they need to deliver on purchase orders from corporations or government departments. Now, the People's Fund is turning up the heat with what they're trying to do here, and they're looking to raise 200 million rand from ordinary South Africans by the first quarter of 2024. This, it says, will help the platform extend its reach and also help empower more entrepreneurs forming part of this critical ecosystem. Welcome to the podcast, Luyanda, and thanks for joining us.
Hi, Akona. Thank you for having me. What a beautiful intro.
Let's go into I think what's more important is the detail you're about to give us, the juice. So we know you have that target of 200 million rand that you're trying to raise from your ordinary South African. How far are you with that target?
So we are at 30 million at present. So in the first month, we managed to achieve 30 million raise of the 200 million thus far. So it's exciting times for us.
That's quite a significant number. You're well on your way. And I'm just trying to correct myself here. Are we really trying to target that first quarter close with that number?
100%. We're trying to target the first quarter close, right? So maybe let me unpack the meat a little bit on that, right? So you described our company as a purchase order funding company. And what we've done historically as the platform is that we've crowdfunded 100 Rand, 1,000 Rand from the general public, right? And then we share the profits of each project that we fund. What we're doing is now we're saying, no, what we want you to actually do is own the company. So the ups, the lows, and all of those things. We gave our investors a decent return in the early years. And even in COVID, while we were being hammered by the market and defaults, we still managed to keep the return above 12% per annum, right? On average on the platform, between 12 and 18%. So it was still decent. But what we want to do is change the capital mindset in our platform from a short-term thinking with a quick return to people who want to do a long-term engagement with us and say, listen, I want to be part of the solution that solves the country.
And I'm glad you touched on that because I really found it quite interesting that the People's Fund is targeting purchase order crowdfunding. I feel like that's so niche. Why target the specific market?
So let me give an example. Government, for example, spends 1 trillion a year buying from businesses, right? Every single year. Of that, less than 10% goes to women, youth, and Black-owned businesses, right? So why we target that is the number one reason for people not being able to deliver more often than not is actually because of a lack of capital, right? And why we have such little participation of youth, women, and Black-owned businesses is because there is no way to access capital to participate. Why we've chosen this niche is that the most important thing as an entrepreneur is to get a customer. Now that the entrepreneurs are getting the customers, what we want to do is provide the capital.
And it's important that you mention the youth aspect of it. And I know there's also a focus on Black ownership and trying to support that. And one of the biggest issues that we face in our country at the moment is that there are no jobs. Unemployment is getting really crazy in a lot of ways because our economy is not able to create the jobs that we need. And we're seeing a lot of people kind of gravitate towards the entrepreneurship route. And the People's Fund obviously is assisting people. In the last 6 years, you've assisted many businesses. And I'm just wondering, are you seeing more young entrepreneurs coming to the People's Fund to kind of help kickstart their entrepreneurship journey? Or is the fund working more with established entrepreneurs who know the game, who've been here, who have the experience?
So we, from the beginning, like for example, operationally, if we exclude the board, I'm the oldest member of the team, and I'm turning 35 this year, right?
Ooh. So you're right at the top of the youth segment.
I'm right at the top of the youth segment, and I'm the oldest person operationally in the company. So our disposition has always been youth, right? First and foremost. And then secondly, with regard to the entrepreneurs, I think our average age is 38, right? But it's the full spectrum. So to answer your question specifically, we're seeing a fair amount of older businesses, but a lot of new businesses as well. And also to deal with the youth thing as part of the campaign. So for each 10,000 Rand we raised, right? What we're going to be doing as the People's Fund is actually training youths who are unemployed, women who are unemployed, to actually tender. We've got a whole campaign going. So on a successful raise of the full 200 million, over the next 5 years, we're going to train 20,000 people on how to participate on the tendering, whether it be government and corporate, teach them, train them. And once they get into those supply chains, provide them the capital to actually execute. Because our objective, more than just making money, is actually to create a functional way for the economy to work for the marginalized youth who feel like they've got no opportunity in the general market. That's the first thing. And then secondly, hold government accountable. Most people don't know how to hold government accountable, right? Especially in their procurement channels. When I say tendering, people think tenderpreneurs. And we've got a skin color that we think of, and we think of nepotism and corruption, right? And if you consider that less than 10% of the purchase, the tenders actually go to black-owned businesses, there's a PR change we need to do with regards to tendering. That's the first layer. Secondly, this corruption notion is because people don't know how to hold the government accountable. Now, what we're going to be training people on is how do you go government accountable? If I tendered and government hasn't awarded me, there's means and mechanisms I can use to find out why not. And it's going to hold them steady in their awarding of tenders, because now they can't give it to their friends, right, on bribery, because they have to justify, why have I given this tender to someone else? So our objective is holistic, right? One, productive assistance of people in the productive capital sector, which is why we chose purchase order funding. Two, holding government accountable for that 1 trillion they spend. And then three, alleviation of poverty for 20,000 youth.
I'm interested in the holding government accountable point, because one of my questions actually relates to the stories that we've heard of people who work with government who are not getting their payments on time. There's either non-payment or slow payment, depending on which level of government you're working with. We see maybe it's more strife with municipalities than it is national government. So I'm wondering, what are the mechanisms then that a person like that, who has worked with the People's Fund, who has taken your assistant and needs to repay, and unfortunately has not gotten paid by the government, or even small businesses that might struggle with cash flows themselves. How do you work with that? How do we hold accountable? And how does the SME also change their agreement with you in terms of repayment?
So the first layer is, Tina, our slogan is Vuvukeza Bangenes of Kapa, right? And it's important because our intention is always to be helping the entrepreneur. So if an entrepreneur can't pay us back because they weren't paid by the department, what we always advocate for is to say, listen, come to us, let's work together. In our contract, we actually have something that says you'll give us see-through. Basically, what that means is that we could use our resources to legally go against your client. You know what I mean? So what we'd be doing is would be helping the entrepreneur to go against the client for non-payment. Entrepreneurs often get nervous. They don't use it as much as we'd like. So we want to improve that, right? Where we say, listen, I'm not trying to go after you. Tell me the truth. Tell me your client is not paying you, and let's pursue that. What we've done historically when we found a repeated nature of clients not paying and things like that, we've blacklisted departments, right? Where there's corruption, either there's non-payment, either there's non-functional administration. There's departments we don't work with. There's whole provinces we don't work with right now, right? As the People's Fund, as an example. Then on the training, how we intend to actually hold them accountable is that, most people don't know that if a government department doesn't pay you on time, right, you could penalize them as a supplier, right? And in that penalization, that needs to go into the Auditor General's reports, right, as a fruitless and wasteful expenditure. And if you take that to Treasury, right, there's a mechanism of doing this, right? You could actually lobby a department to no longer get funding if they are not meeting their mandate. But I want to clear up something. There's also a lot of anecdotal perspective on non-payment, right? So if I don't get paid, like if we're running a show on government payments, right, there's 10 of us got a contract, 9 of us got paid, 1 of us didn't get paid. When we're running a show on government payments, who's calling in? The one who did not get paid. Generally speaking, government is a really good payer, right? They've got a very high success rate on paying in terms of in under 30 days, right? At least with the departments we've worked with, you know what I mean? So what we need to also do is fix the PR around that, because there's falsification of information or presentation of a picture that's not completely true. If I've got time, I'll give you a quick example. It should take me 30 seconds. There was an article written 3 or 4 years ago where it said government owes small business 7 billion, right? And when you read the article, you assume, That's a big number, right? Then you dig into the article. The first thing about the article is that it's an editorial, right? So it's an editorial letter by a member of parliament. I won't mention the party, right? And what it doesn't dig in and do properly is that it doesn't say, oh, it's 7 billion that was not paid within 30 days, right? Of the 1 trillion that government spent. That means 993 billion was paid on time. Does that make sense? Was paid in under 30 days. Do you see how the picture changes very quickly?
Definitely, the picture does change. And I think also just adding to what you're saying and how the People's Fund is filtering people or departments out that aren't complying as they should, it kind of helps with propping up that PR then, to your point.
100%. So we filter out the ones that don't work, and we're very public about it on our website. I just won't do it on the radio so that you guys don't get in trouble. We don't mind getting in trouble because, like we're on country duty more than anything, right? And the most important thing for us is, can the system work? And there are very important things that need to be done over the next few years as a collective, as a country, and as a people. And that can't be done when we don't talk about these things.
Definitely. And I think just also shaming maybe those that don't do what they're supposed to do is going to help kind of shame them into good behavior. But moving forward, and I'm just sticking onto the same train of thought, I'm wondering then, is there certain industries that the fund is targeting and industries that you're probably staying away from? I mean, recently we know that the construction industry had some issues and is also facing issues currently now that makes it hard for many to operate in. And I'm just wondering, is there a sense there from the People Fund on who you work with and which industries you don't?
Oh, we got burnt quite badly in the construction industry. So we don't even play close to that. We will do light construction, but heavy duty construction we do not do. We got burnt quite badly, right? Generally speaking. What we do look for in that regard, like for example with the construction stuff, is we look for direct relationships with the end client, right? So that we could directly interact with the end client to understand the specifications and that sort of thing. But outside of construction, we're generally very open to most industries, right? If you've got a track record, as an example, for most entrepreneurs who've got a track record, we will work with you and we'll give you preferential rates. If you don't have a track record, we'll still work with you. But what we'll evaluate is the complexity and the difficulty of what you're doing, right? And say, can we fund this? Can we risk the crowd's capital? Because at the end of the day, it is people's money, we're black, you know what it's like. Mostly, money, you stock fair, like at the end of the year.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, we have to keep the capital safe, but at the same time balance it with, can we create an environment where people are getting funded? So we will evaluate almost every project, right? Particular exclusions, for now, we don't have an opposition, but we generally don't do any of the sin markets, especially some of our capital come from places where we can't do sin markets. So that would be your tobaccos, the alcohols, the firearms, and that sort of thing, right? While we do supply into the security cluster, right? The SAP, the correctional services, and the army, right? So we do supply into them. We generally stay clear of the sin goods, right? Just for compliance perspective, and then also construction.
And I think people hearing this now and listening to you speak will be comforted to know that you are taking care of the investments and thinking about risk and how that's going to play into their returns. I'm interested for people looking to gain access to your funding solutions, what criteria will they have to meet to qualify?
For any business, they must have a valid purchase order and they must be 51% black owned. That's as simple as that. We don't need anything else. What we will do is ask for bank statements and the various other things. But primarily what we're looking for is that you must have a purchase order or a tender or a contract, and then you must be 51% black owned.
Mm-hmm. And then how long does it take to get funded? And also just on the back of that question, what is the maximum or minimum that they could get from the People's Fund?
So we don't have a minimum, and the maximum we measure it on what capital we have available. So part of why the usual time that it takes is from vetting to approval usually takes about a week, right? And then the funding depends on the capital availability. Because we're crowdfunded, that's part of the reason why we're raising capital. All of our capital is out in the market, so much so that we are actually referring deals to our other players in the purchase order funding space, right? Because we are maxed out. They are capital heavy, deal low. We are deal heavy, capital low. So we're currently raising that 200 million that we were talking about.
Yes, that 200 million is trying to get you to help more people. And I want us to speak about that because you mentioned that you framed it in a way as if you're going public. I'd want you to just clarify that. What does that exactly mean for the People's Fund? What does going public mean? Are you getting listed on the national boards? How is that going? What's going on there?
So the background should probably start about 5 years ago when we actually got into purchase order funding. One of the things we did was actually devise a mechanism to actually offer funding for entrepreneurs that didn't qualify, right? And what I mean by that is if you look at the National Credit Act, right, it basically says you have to demonstrate affordability when you're outlaying less than 250,000, right? Now, imagine Utsepo comes along, he's got a business that does 2,000 to 10,000 a month, gets a purchase order for 50,000, he needs 40,000 from us. By the National Credit Act, he can't demonstrate affordability for that loan, right? So what we did was we said, listen, we'll come in, we'll buy the goods from the supplier, get them delivered to your end client, then we'll send you an invoice for goods delivered, right? And we basically restructured that methodology so that it could actually give access to entrepreneurs, right? And then we got invited by actually the regulators, the FSCA, the Prudential Authority, the South African Reserve Bank, etc., right? And got invited into the Intergovernmental FinTech Working Group, which was basically trying to figure out how to regulate the thing we've just done, which was basically say, listen, we want to access capital, the regulation doesn't work or doesn't exist or impedes people from participating. And we became the sandbox and we basically became the example that they use in terms of figuring out how to give more access to capital without making the laws too prohibitive. Now, following in that vein, we did the same thing again. What we did is we figured out that you can go public, firstly. It's called public unlisted. So an example of a company that's public unlisted would be a Clover or a Pioneer Foods, right? And basically public unlisted is this, is that you are registered as a public company, but you're unlisted on the main exchange, which would be the JSE, right? What we're looking for is an alternative exchange, right? And I don't want to use Alt-X. It's not Alt-X, but it's an alternative exchange. Basically, our shares would be sold via the secretariat of our company, right? The company's secretariat. We're going to put those on an exchange, right? We're deciding between 3 platforms. By the time in the end of February, we would have known our platform and put it on them. So what we're trying to do is break the mold of how people think about raising capital, because we've got our company already registered as a public company. We converted it from a private company to a public company so that the general public can own shares. And the thing we have to do is be cautious not to break the financial sector laws at all times. So we're actually interacting right now with the FSCA. They're trying to check if we're not in contravention of any of the laws in any regard. So that's how we're doing it. But our hope is that from our raise, we see 10 to 20 other companies actually do the same thing and say, listen, we're going public, we want to go raise from the public, and then we're going to have a prospectus and a business plan that basically states what our intentions, and then people decide, like general everyday people can decide and participate and have the returns of VCs, but also sharing the risk.
So Leander, I should come back to you then next year, Feb, just to check in on the progress there. How you guys are going.
100%. Please do.
Sure. And then lastly, just for those interested in participating and helping you achieve this dream that you have and this ambition that you have, what do returns look like for them and how do they go about investing quickly?
Gotcha. So the first and most important thing I have to state very clearly that these returns are not guaranteed. It would be irresponsible of me to claim that, right? It's in a small business. The second thing is what our expected returns are is that we want to grow the value of your shares quite significantly, similar to the VCs over the next 6 years, right? So we want to grow it by 40% in value year on year. That's what we want to achieve over the next 6 years, which would give you almost a doubling of the value of your money over the next 6 years, right? Through aggressive market penetration, right? Because if we raise that 200 million in full, we are going to be one of the preferred purchase order funders in the country. And that's our objective.
Well, there you have it. Hearing it straight from the source, Luyanda Jafta of the People's Fund. Thank you so much for your time and sharing what you guys are trying to do over there.
Thank you so much, Akona.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and follow Small Business Conversations, and do not forget to share our episodes. If you wanted to contribute to the conversation, you can tweet me at machoba_a, or you can email us at smepodcast@moneyweb.co.za to share your thoughts and suggestions for future conversations. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.
You've been listening to Small Business Conversations with Akona Machoba. To listen to more Moneyweb podcasts, go to moneyweb.co.za, the Moneyweb app, or your favorite podcast platforms. Moneyweb, your trusted source for business and investment insights.